2024 presidential candidate Vivek Ramaswamy has tied Florida Governor Ron DeSantis for second place in the GOP presidential race. A new Kaplan Strategies survey shows DeSantis and Ramaswamy both tied at 12% each, far behind former President Donald Trump, who has taken the top spot at 48%. No other candidate is above single digits, with former New Jersey Governor Chris Christie and former Vice President Mike Pence both at 5%. Former South Carolina Governor Nikki Haley with 3%, and former Arkansas Governor Asa Hutchinson at 1%, according to the survey.
Kaplan predicts the GOP race is likely coming down to 3 candidates, including Trump, DeSantis, or Ramaswamy. Former President Donald Trump has forecasted that DeSantis might not be in second place for much longer, and Ramaswamy could fill that spot in his place. According to Florida Politics, the Kaplan survey could be an outlier, as the race to the White House polling average still shows Trump at 52%, DeSantis at 20%, Pence at 6%, and Ramaswamy at 5%. So, Jessica, Vivek Ramaswamy has run a rather unconventional campaign for Republican. He's appeared on The Breakfast Club. He first announced his candidacy on the now canceled Tucker Carlson Tonight program on Fox News. He has basically been able to manage his own news cycle, whereas a lot of the other candidates have fallen into the trap of just responding and reacting to whatever Trump does. It seems like he has managed to avoid that trap entirely. Now, that might be partially because Trump hasn't attacked him yet, but at the same time, he seems like he has a good understanding of how the media cycle works, how to get his ideas out there on social media. His Twitter account, which I believe he runs entirely by himself, is doing incredibly well. And this is clearly reflecting in the polls.
He also has run an interesting campaign when it comes to finances. He's kind of the Mary Kay of presidential candidates, with his offering of 10% commission on anyone who donates based off of your referral link. He's literally turned his fundraising into an MLM. And the way he's framed this is fascinating as well. You have all of these bundlers who get together a bunch of large donations and take up to 10%, a large cut of the money they fundraise for candidates. And he's saying, well, why don't we democratize this? Why doesn't the everyday donor get a cut of the people they refer to the campaign? And so I don't know how much of the buzz around Ramaswamy is because he's the Mary Kay of presidential candidates, and because this referral program turning into something entrepreneurial for people who support his campaign is something that's grown his base. I think it's a really fascinating approach. I don't know if it's one that will work or one that we should even support, but it definitely is interesting and unconventional, but I think just furthers how far we go in to the political industrial complex in the U.S. when it comes to elections.
I don't think it's an MLM, really. I think it's more about trying to give more ownership and profitability opportunity to small donors and people who gather up support from their friends, as opposed to all of the money making in campaigns being from these top political strategy shops that sell data, sell your data, and use all of these very shady means of funneling money through PACs to candidates to get around federal reporting limits. So I support the idea of giving 10% of the earnings or of the donations to people who bring them in. I think it's a great way to empower small donors and people who otherwise don't have the ability to potentially make money or feel empowered through the political donation process. Now, on his ideas otherwise, it seems like Ramaswamy is trying to take, I think, a more cultural approach to the issues as opposed to some of the other Republican candidates. And he's actually doing a better job, I think, of making the case against what he's referred to as maybe wokeism or left-wing cultural Marxism than DeSantis has. And that's supposed to be DeSantis's bread and butter, right? When he was Florida governor, or during his tenure as Florida governor, obviously he still is, he has made the case that he is where woke goes to die. Florida is where woke goes to die. And he seems to be getting increasingly desperate with that pitch. He recently announced that he's going to try to go after Anheuser-Busch, the parent company of Bud Light, for bringing on Dylan Mulvaney as a marketing influencer. And for conservatives, that story is like 2 months old. And I don't understand how he's going to go after Ambev for just making a bad marketing decision, as if that's a crime of some sort, and a blow to it is a blow to investors, but I don't understand how he's going to make the case that there's anything that the government can do about that. Businesses make bad decisions all the time, and to hyper politicize it in that way and to turn it into a target of government doesn't really make sense to me. It just seems like he's grasping at straws as he continues to decline in the polls. And a lot of people at the beginning of the campaign, before DeSantis even announced, really criticized Trump for attacking him preemptively, and especially for going after him on COVID, which he objectively had good policies on for Republicans and conservatives. But it turned out that Trump's strategy was entirely correct. What he essentially did is he forced DeSantis to have to start his campaign by redefining himself, because Trump had already created this image of DeSanctimonious in voters' brains. And he also neutered DeSantis on the one issue that he could possibly run to the right of Trump on, which was COVID. DeSantis had a very good case to make that he handled COVID better than the former president, that he would have fired Dr. Fauci, that he was one of the first states to issue the lockdowns and open up for residents. And by taking that off of the table so early and litigating it early, Trump has just gotten rid of that as a talking point throughout DeSantis's campaign. And clearly there was some, I think, rather intelligent strategy coming out of the Trump campaign for that maybe a lot of people didn't catch when it was first happening, because they thought that it would alienate people who liked both Trump and DeSantis.
I'm always confused at people recalling DeSantis's strategy on COVID and saying that it was distinct from Donald Trump. A lot of people do this in the direction of DeSantis kept the borders of Florida open and allowed travel. I actually went into Florida during the first couple months of the pandemic to go stay with friends there. And I drove through every state from New York to Florida and was stopped at the border in Florida. And I had to fill out paperwork, have my temperature taken. There was a whole host of cars that were being processed by folks who worked for the state of Florida. And if you didn't have your temperature taken and pass, and you couldn't present that you had tested negative for COVID, you would not be allowed into the state. So that's always confusing to me, because the narrative doesn't seem to match what the actual policy was in Florida at the beginning of the pandemic. But I think DeSantis's fall in the polls and Ramaswamy's rise in the polls, I credit it to one thing, and it's that DeSantis seems to only be good at tearing things down and not building a future or a vision for a future even, or proposing policies that will improve upon the country in the future. He's really good at saying X, Y, and Z are bad. We have to tear down these terrible policies. We have to take, these books away from kids. That only goes so far. Fear is a really limited tool when it comes to organizing. And I think Ramaswamy's building maybe an MLM kind of way of fundraising for his campaign by saying, you can be a salesman too. You can refer me to other people. You can earn 10% on the campaign. Are you more likely to refer someone to a presidential candidate if you're going to make a 10% cut off of their donation? I would say yes, but that is a short-term return on your investment. Whereas you should want a president to be elected because long-term they're good for you, your family, and the country. And so has Ramaswamy done that? I think he's proposed a little bit more of a positive vision campaigning than DeSantis has, but I'm not convinced either one has really captured a permanent base. I really see this as still a continued horse race when it comes to the Republican frontrunner who's going to be second to Donald Trump.
Yeah, I think there's no question that Trump is obviously still the front runner in this race. I think what Ramaswamy has done is kind of exceptional just because of the fact that he really didn't have strong name ID. A lot of people in even the Republican Party didn't know who he was before he started his campaign for president. And to get up to the double digits in this poll, and I know that this poll might be an outlier. There was a Morning Consult poll earlier this week that said if the primary were held today, who would you vote for? DeSantis was at 20 and Ramaswamy was at, I think, 8%, so 12 points behind there. But for him to elevate even to that level above the former vice president, above former governors and current senators that are incredibly popular, I think that's pretty astounding, and he deserves a lot of credit for that. And he is an exceptional public speaker. When you see his performances on these somewhat adversarial media ventures, whether it's The Breakfast Club or other podcasts that he's been on, he just comports himself really well, and he's really good at explaining his ideas and his policies. He also recently released a short list of potential Supreme Court nominees, which I don't think any of the other candidates have done so far. So having these sort of original ideas is really important for any candidate in a presidential race, because it sets you apart from the people that you're running against. And that originality combined with his ability to speak publicly, I think are both very powerful tools for him as he moves forward in this race. And I'm excited to see how he performs at the first Republican debate.
Yeah, he's exceeding most people's expectations for a candidate fighting for a primary nomination by actually having a platform in 2024. It's really rare. I think the way he's decided to get on the debate stage as well is kind of interesting, saying like, hey, instead of donating a larger dollar amount of money, do smaller donations so I can get more to get to the threshold to get to the debate stage. I think it is tough when you're a candidate that doesn't have as much name recognition. I think RFK Jr. has that family name recognition, DeSantis because he's governor and his involvement with the Trump campaign, Pence because he was VP, Nikki Haley's been center stage a lot, and Ramaswamy, I think in many ways, has been the underdog in this primary race. And so it's interesting to see someone like him rise in the polls. I think now he's probably going to get more press because he is rivaling DeSantis, and I think it'll be interesting to see DeSantis and Trump try and draw some distinctions between Ramaswamy. I would like to see someone like him on the debate stage, and I think a lot of others would as well, just because I think he's going to force a policy conversation beyond just the culture war.
Definitely. I'm looking forward to that as well. We'll be back with more Rising after this.